Good morning. This is Faith at Faith and Books, and I'm going to do my next installment of May is for Magazine, and I'm focusing on Chapter 3 of the book that was published in serial form in McClure's magazine in 1902 by Ida M. Tarbell, and it's called The History of the Standard Oil Company, and it's her takedown of Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller. So here's chapter 3. Before I get started with that, I have to show you that I just went out and picked more strawberries. And then last night, the 4-year-old and I went out and looked at this huge amount of strawberries in this big bowl. This is like my biggest bowl. So we are really getting strawberries, which is wonderful. And even our cherries are ripening. So we're getting cherries. So a lot of them are kind of, I think because we've had so much rain, they're kind of split. Can you see that? You see that they're split? Or also they've got this going on. I don't know. So I don't know. A lot of them aren't really fully ripe yet, but they are starting to ripen. So we got to get out there and start picking cherries as well. So that's exciting. But anyway, back to Ida and her takedown of Rockefeller. I just love that she did this. So what happened was Rockefeller had used this sort of, what do you call it, like a facade of a company, the South Improvement Company that he had bought because it had these charter rights, and he contracted with the railroads, and he had this scheme where they got rebates for shipping oil, and that meant that he could ship it much cheaper than his the competition. And he did all this very secretly. He got together with other oilmen and with the railroads, and it was very much a conspiracy from the beginning. It was very secret. They had to sign pledges to keep it secret. They knew it was illegal, but apparently the railroads had been corrupt from the beginning in this way. And so then the word gets out by mistake. The whole conspiracy comes out, and the oilmen in Pennsylvania find out about this, and of course they're up in arms. So I'll just read just little excerpts from this chapter. The beginning chapter is, for several days, an uneasy rumor had been running up and down the oil regions. Freight rates were going up. Now, an advance in a man's freight bill may ruin his business. More, it may mean the ruin of a region. Rumors said that the new rate meant just this. That is, that see, I'm reading with my magnifying glass because the light isn't good, so it's hard for me to follow. It may mean the ruin of a region. Rumors said that the new rate meant just this. That is, that it more than covered the margin of profit in any branch of the oil business. There was another feature to the report. The railroads were not going to apply the proposed tariffs to everybody. They had agreed to give to a company unheard of until now, the South Improvement Company, a special rate considerably lower than the new open rate. It was only a rumor, and many people discredited it. Why should the railroads ruin the oil regions to build up a company of outsiders? So that was Rockefellers Country. So anyway, when they found out that the rumors were true, they did a lot of things. They formed a union. The oilmen formed a union. They went to the newspapers. They went to Congress. They went to the legislature in Pennsylvania, and they published this blacklist. The newspapers published a blacklist of people who were involved in this conspiracy. They were Charles Lockhart, W.P. Logan, somebody Waring, somebody else, Warden, John Rockefeller, and some other guy. Can't read the writing. Anyway, so the backlash was really bad, and at one point, Rockefeller really started losing money. The railroads backed down right away. They were very wimpy about it, and so he started having to pay higher rates. And they were so, maligned and ostracized and everything, that he and Watson, who was the president of South Improvement Company, but sort of just a figure, Rockefeller was really the brains behind the operation. They actually went to a meeting with the oilmen, with the union, and they were kicked out of the room. Like Rockefeller wasn't even able to say anything. He got kicked out. But what he did was he just worked behind the scenes, dealing with the whole issue. So they had to take that first defeat of the South Improvement Company, and what he did was he just went very quietly and built up the Standard Oil Company in its stead. After all the brouhaha had died down, the oilmen had finally decided that their blockade against the South Improvement Company and all the people who had conspired to undermine the competition illegally, when all that had died down and the legislature had come out and said, kind of punished the South Improvement Company and all that, they decided, okay, well, we want to be able to have free trade, and so we're not going to continue to blockade. Because they thought they had won. They thought they had made their point. But what Rockefeller did was he just went and did it again in a slightly different and devious, equally devious way with the Standard Oil Company. So I'll just read, hey, now why did I mark this? They really, here's another, the South Improvement Company alias the Standard Oil Company. I'll just read this beginning of this paragraph about how they responded to Rockefeller. It was inevitable that under the pressure of their indignation and resentment, some person or persons should be fixed upon as responsible and should be hated accordingly. Before the lifting of the embargo, this responsibility had been fixed. It was the Standard Oil Company of Cleveland. So the oil regions decided which was at the bottom of the business, and the Mephistopheles of the Cleveland Company, as they put it, was John D. Rockefeller. So they were not happy with him. And the thing is, the union of the oil regions businessmen, they weren't, they expected less from the railroads, but they really felt betrayed by their fellow oilmen, the people who had come into this oil business that had, risen so quickly in 10 or 12 years. They had felt like a sense of camaraderie, that they were all in this exciting new business together, this enterprise together. And so they really felt betrayal by fellow comrades. Mr. Rockefeller didn't see things this way at all. And she's got, I'll just read the very last part of the article, which is captioned, Mr. Rockefeller's Opinions and Character, because Rockefeller was a real contradiction. There was something really amiss with him. But anyway, Mr. Rockefeller's Opinions and Character. Mr. Rockefeller's point of view was different. He believed that the good of all was in a combination which would control the business as the South Improvement Company proposed to control it. So, he didn't distinguish between what was good for him and most profitable for him and what was good for the whole business. Like, he thought he was the oil business. And so if things went well with him, it meant it was going well with everybody. So just kind of a strange attitude. Such a combination, that's what she's calling the monopoly, such a combination would end at once all the abuses the business suffered. As rebates and special rates were essential to this control, he favored them. Of course, Mr. Rockefeller knew that the railroad was a public carrier and that its charter forbade discrimination, but he knew that the railroads did not pretend to obey the laws governing them, that they regularly granted special rates and rebates to those who had large amounts of freight. That is, you could bargain with the railroads as you could with a man carrying on a strictly private business, depending in no way on a public franchise. Moreover, Mr. Rockefeller knew that if he did not get rebates, somebody else would. That they were for the wariest, the shrewdest, and the most persistent. If somebody was to get rebates, why not he? This point of view was no uncommon one. Many men held it and felt a sort of scorn, as practical men always do for theorists, when it was contended that the shipper was as wrong in the taking of the rates as the railroads in granting them. Thus, on one hand, there was an exaggerated sense of personal independence, on the other, a firm belief in combination. On one hand, a determination to root out the vicious system of rebates practiced by the railway. On the other, a determination to keep it alive and profit by it. Those theories which the body of oil men held as vital and fundamental, Mr. Rockefeller and his associates either did not comprehend or were deaf to. This lack of comprehension by many men of what seems to other men to be the most obvious principles of justice is not rare. Many men who are widely known as good share it. Mr. Rockefeller was good, in quotes. There was no more faithful Baptist in Cleveland than he. Every enterprise of that church he had supported liberally from his youth. He gave to its poor. He visited its sick. He wept with its suffering. Moreover, he gave unostentatiously to many outside charities of whose worthiness he was satisfied. He was simple and frugal in his habits. He never went to the theater, never drank wine. He was a devoted husband, and he gave much time to the training of his children, seeking to develop them in his own habits of economy and of charity. Yet he was willing to strain every nerve to obtain for himself special and illegal privileges from the railroads, which were bound to ruin every man in the oil business not sharing them with him. Religious emotion and sentiments of charity, propriety, and self-denial seemed to have taken the place in him of notions of justice and regard for the rights of others. Unhampered then by any ethical considerations, undismayed by the clamor of the oil regions, believing firmly as ever that relief for the disorders in the oil business lay in combining and controlling the entire refining interest, this man of vast patience and foresight took up his work. The day after the newspapers of the oil regions printed the report of the Congressional Committee on Commerce denouncing the South Improvement Company as, quote, one of the most gigantic and dangerous conspiracies ever attempted, end quote, and declaring that if it had not been checked in time, it would, quote, would have resulted in the absorption and arbitrary control of trade in all the great interest of the country, end quote. Mr. Rockefeller and several other members of the South Improvement Company appeared in the oil regions. They had come, they explained, to present a new plan of cooperation and to show the oil men that it was to their interest to go into it. Whether they would be able to obtain by persuasion what they had failed to obtain by assault was now an interesting uncertainty. So that's where the chapter ends. And I'll just have time in May to do the next chapter so we can find out what happens then. So I have a feeling Mr. Rockefeller comes out ahead. Something just tells me that. Anyway, so that's my installment of May is for Magazine. And I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day today. This is the official day, right? It's Monday. Usually in our town there's a big fair that we go to. But, you know, of course, they're not holding it today. So, anyway, take care. Talk to you later. Bye.